Recorder, you ready? I think it's 9 o'clock. All right, thanks everyone for coming out here. Early morning, appreciate it. We're here to talk about Phishing Frenzy, new InfoSec and open source web application to help manage your phishing campaigns. What we're going to cover, a little bit about myself, common phishing challenges that we encounter every day, Phishing Frenzy solutions, how it can help ease the pain, core functionality and features of Phishing Frenzy, and if the demo gods are on my back, we'll do a live demonstration if it all goes well, and a little outro for questions, concerns, and anything along those lines. Who am I? I'm Brandon Mccann. I'm a senior security consultant with Accuvant Labs, part of their attack and penetration team, co-founder of pentestgeek.com. I go by the handle of Zeknox on IRC and the Twitters. So common phishing challenges. When we're doing email phishing, we start off with the email phishing process of, if we break it down in the simplest form, email enumeration of email addresses. Once we have those email addresses, we need to send out the phishing email, and we're going to generate statistics. So what are we going to give the client at the end of the campaign? First step, we're going to enumerate email addresses. Either two ways that we're commonly going to do this. Either the client's going to provide the email addresses to us, or we're going to go out on the internet. Things like Jigsaw, one of my colleagues wrote Jigsaw. It's an email enumeration script that goes out there and helps get you emails. Also, if you use Kali Linux or Backtrack, the Harvester is great to get some email addresses. Once we have email addresses, we got to send those email addresses out. Some of the common ways that we're going to send emails, we can go right through the web interface. We can set up an email client like Outlook or Thunderbird. We can connect right to the SMTP server itself through Telnet or Netcat. Or we could, script something up to directly communicate with the SMTP server and do some fancy stuff. Common challenges when we phishing, generate statistics. So some of the things the clients always ask me are, how many users clicked on the phishing email? How many users downloaded an executable? How many users entered passwords into our phishing website? And what access did this lead to? So the common question is, how do we generate these statistics? One of the most common ways is through the Apache logs. So the Apache web server is serving up our website, and essentially if we go through the logs, we can get a lot of information out of them, such as how many users clicked on it and things like that. The challenge is, if we look at Apache logs, here's a normal GET request to the root directory. And if you're just simply going by the Apache logs, the challenge is, how do you know if one user clicked on the link 30 times, or how do you know if it was 30 users clicking on it one time? There's no unique identifier in the Apache logs. Essentially, it's very difficult to generate statistics by not having some sort of unique identifier. So this is where Phishing Frenzy comes in. What is Phishing Frenzy? It's a platform to help streamline your phishing process, generate advanced reports, manage templates, and really help ease the creation, managing the campaign, and everything that goes along with phishing. Where can you get Phishing Frenzy? As of last night, it's out on GitHub. This is an open source community project. Also, we have Phishing Frenzy templates. So the Phishing Frenzy web application allows you to back up and restore templates. So maybe you're not a developer, but you want to give back to the community. You can essentially create your own phishing templates, export them out of the Phishing Frenzy web interface, and you can put a pull request out here, and we can share templates together. So if you can craft up some fancy HTML, you can share it and give back to the community. So a little bit about how I fish. When I first started out fishing, I typically did email spoofing. I've kind of gotten away from that because that's dependent on the client's SMTP gateway, so whether they allow certain spoofing or not. So what I've done now is when I do a phishing campaign is I just purchase a valid domain, $10, $15, purchase one, it's going to set up a valid MX record, and really the chances of getting caught and getting blocked by a spam filter are slim to none. I wouldn't say that's always the case. It obviously depends on the threshold of masking your links, specific terms within the subject line, and things like that. But really, your chances of getting to end users' inboxes are much better if you have a valid, domain name, valid MX record, and you can even go to the length of, changing the who is information and clone the who is information exactly to what the client's who is information. Typically what I like to do is I like to impersonate someone internally within the company. So if I'm going to purchase a domain for, let's say I was doing Google, I might just do, instead of O's, I might just do zeros or something common that looks like Google, in hopes that when it goes to the end user's inbox that they're not really looking at the domain, it looks very similar, and they trust it as some high-level executive who maybe told them to update a patch or test their passwords, things like that. So that's kind of the methodology I use when I fish. And ultimately, what I like to do is I like to harvest credentials, or I like to get code execute payloads. I personally don't do a whole lot of browser exploitation. I think that it's a little less stable, and if you can create payloads that get around antivirus, I feel like you got a much better chance of getting remote code execution and getting access to the end user's workstation. So a little bit more about Phishing Frenzy. I chose it in Ruby on Rails. Why Ruby on Rails? If you're familiar with Ruby on Rails, the MVC architecture, model view controller, helps organize and give you structure when you're building out a project like this. I love the strong database support. It makes it robust and scalability. I'm not an HTML guru, but Rails has these helpers that make life easy. Installation's easy. If you've ever used a Rails, it's really mobile. It's not dependent on a specific database, so whether you want Postgres, SQLite, MySQL, doesn't matter. And Ruby's my language of choice. So a little bit of how the MVC architecture applies to Phishing Frenzy here. The model really is what communicates with the database. So in our case, we have a campaigns table, we have templates table, specific campaign settings and email settings that all go into the database store. The view is really what gets rendered to the end user. So the home page, a list of phishing templates and things like that. Controller is nothing more than a set of actions that you want. So we have a campaigns controller, and specific actions within there might be list, edit, delete, and things like that for the campaigns. How you'd go about installing Phishing Frenzy. If you're familiar with Ruby on Rails, you know that it's really easy because of all the helpers. You would start out by cloning the repo. Install the gems by bundle install. Metasploit kind of does this too now, so if you're familiar with that. Create your database. So like I said, it doesn't matter what database you use, just initially create a database, create an account, and then all you got to do is migrate the database schema using Rake. So Ruby comes with these Rake, which is a helper. Set up your schema, and then using seed, you get to put in pre-populate data. So in our case, we pre-populate phishing templates for you. So right out of the box, we'll give you 2 phishing templates, and seeding it is what does that. Once you're up and ready to install, browse the website and enjoy Phishing Frenzy. So Phishing Frenzy, once you've set up a campaign, you got various campaign options. Here's a simple example of how we're setting up SMTP settings. So if you've ever set up anything like an email client, Outlook, Thunderbird, it's really the same. We're just where do we want to send our emails through? And in this case, we're configured to use GoDaddy. We got a valid domain, we got an email account, and the port. So in this case, here's a simple example of how we customize the campaign, but we'll get into this more in the demo. Phishing Frenzy allows us to manage phishing templates. So if you're like me, you kind of got like 1 or 4 phishing scenarios that you use time and time, and you like to reuse those, customize them to each campaign. So Phishing Frenzy will help you create, backup, restore, and customize, and even better, reuse for all phishing campaigns. So once you have a template, you can assign it to any future campaigns. Here's a little look at what the templates page looks like. So we got 4 templates in here. We can back up, restore. That's a little hard to see there. Another feature is what I call track unique visitors. So I talked about the problem with Apache logs, how it's difficult to know which users actually click on the phishing link. How I solve that is I append a specific unique identifier to the end of the URL. So the top one, you can see this is how you typically send out a phishing URL. You just get them to click on it, but there's no unique identifier. So what we have is the option to do track user clicks, where we're going to do some sort of parameter, i.e. ID equals, and then their email address base64 encoded. So what Phishing Frenzy does is every time it sends out an email to a victim, it base64 encodes their email, and it sticks that at the end of the URL. So now once the user clicks on that, you now have that in your Apache logs as evidence you can go back to when the client says, our CEO never clicked on the link. You can go timestamp it and go, well, actually he did, and he downloaded and ran this and that. So this is I know there's many ways to fix this problem. This is how I go about it. It works well for me. I know sometimes people think that this is a crazy URL and that might heighten suspicion. In my experiences, it really doesn't matter. The users just want to click on it once it reaches their inbox. So once we've launched a phishing campaign, we want to generate reports. What do the clients want to get out of this? They want to know, like I said, how many clicks, how many unique visitors. Maybe you want browsers. If you do want to go to browser exploitation, what IP addresses came? So was it the client's IP address? Was it a copy shop? Was it Microsoft going and downloading your executable because they got an automated process to do that? And then we can, illustrate. We can illustrate where they came from with mapping it out through Google Maps. So here's an example of a report once we've executed a phishing campaign, what it might look like. At this time, we'll go out to a demonstration. If the demo gods are angry, I got a video prepped, so if all goes well, hopefully we can do a live demonstration here. So yeah, let's give it a whirl. All right, hope that's good for you guys in back. Hope you can see it all right. Good? Cool. All right, so this is essentially Phishing Frenzy in its default installation. Just installed it out there, haven't really done much other than pre-populated a template for us, or pre-populated a campaign for us. So your initial homepage is your dashboard of active phishing campaigns going on, and various status of whether Metasploit's running, things like that, Apache's running, virtual hosts that are configured. So I'm just going to kind of go through the interface here to give you a look and feel of what's going on. So campaigns, we got a campaign here already pre-populated. Templates, various templates that you can use for all your campaigns. Like I said, if other people develop campaigns, we can simply restore those templates right in and apply those to any future campaigns. Reports. So once we've launched a campaign, we'll generate reports. In this case, we don't have any campaigns that have launched. We haven't sent any emails, so there's no reports to generate at this time. We've got a frequently asked questions, so if you're not familiar with the framework, frequently asked questions, how to create a campaign, new template, things like that. And an administration, so if you want to create multiple users, change users, you can have multiple users within the framework launching and running phishing campaigns all at the same time. So we will try to do a live campaign here and add a new campaign. And all we need is a name. And we've already created the campaign. So you can see it drops down there. To save time, I've already pre-populated all the options here. So I'm going to go into this phishing campaigns against AccuVount Labs. And these are all the options. And really, don't get overwhelmed. There's various options that you can do, but it's all so you can customize to your phishing campaign. If we drill down, one of the first ones is, really the victims. Who do you want to send to? This will take just a list. If your client provides you just a huge list, you copy and paste those right in. Or it also, at this time, supports CSV. So if you got a list in CSV, not a problem. Just paste them in here, and it'll add to the victims list. So we currently see we have 6 victims that we want to send to at this time. You can simply click on this, and you can see the list of email addresses right here. If you want to get rid of one, client says, hey, we don't want to send to them at this time, simply edit the list, it's deleted, and now we're down to 5 email addresses. Template selection. So once you have various templates within your framework, you can simply apply those to a campaign here. So in this case, we're going to do an Intel password checker. SMTP settings, we talked about this before. Basically, if you set up an email client, we're doing the same thing here. Where do you want to send out to? And this is set up for GoDaddy, so I've purchased a GoDaddy domain, and this is their SMTP server. So in this specific instance, that's why I've configured this way. Email settings. So, what do you want the subject to be? Who do you want to send from? What do you want to display from? So, sometimes the email address is different from what you want it to actually say. So we can edit in the email headers, what you want it to actually say. You got to be careful because sometimes if they don't match up close enough, you'll get caught in a spam filter here. The phishing URL. So when you send out the email, what do you want the users to click on? In this case, I have a phishing URL that I want them to click on. And the last one is the fully qualified domain name. So this one's important because the fully qualified domain name is for Apache. Apache, those are familiar with virtual hosts, it allows us to run multiple websites on one box. So we can run multiple phishing campaigns on one box. And we just need to tell it what the fully qualified domain name is. So Phishing Frenzy knows which website to serve up when your end users click on the link. So that's why we got that. Some other phishing options. We talked about track user clicks. Essentially, if you don't want to, have a unique identifier, just uncheck this, and you can send out, and you're not going to track each unique click, and that's fine. In our case, we want to do that. So going back to the campaigns here, you can see we have one green dot. Usually, a rule of thumb before you want to launch a campaign, you want 2 green dots. So in this case, the website's not active. Active means that the virtual host isn't configured. Apache's not configured to serve up this website at this time. So anyone who hits it, they're not actually going to be served up our phishing website. So let's dive in here and let's turn the campaign to active. So at this time, what's going on is Apache is configuring the virtual host and restarting Apache so that now intel.issds.com is going to be served up once someone clicks on the link. And again, we can dive back right into the campaigns. 2 green dots, usually a good sign that you're ready to launch your phishing campaign. Now, normally, what I would do is I would send this to myself, and I would get it the way I want it. And you can simply do that by saying test email here. And send it to yourself, get it the way you want it. If you want to edit the template, you can go right in here, and you can edit the template itself. Now, I know it looks cumbersome and it looks overwhelming, but if you've ever, a standard HTML, so if you've, set up a phishing campaign through Thunderbird or Outlook or anything like that, you can just export that HTML, paste it right in here, and you're ready to, launch your email. So we're all set. We're just going to try to launch out this email here and see what happens. Sure. Yep. And so right now it's going through the 5 email addresses, going out through the SMTP server, and it's sending it one by one. It's tracking user, it's sending for each email address, it's creating a unique URL for that user. And so when they click on it, we know exactly who's going to click on it. Obviously, in the future, I'd put this in the background, maybe do some Ajax so we get some event sourcing. So we're getting some feedback of what's going on, but in this case, it just takes a little bit to send them out. And you can see we've sent some emails out. It's just giving them a warning because it tried to send out through SSL, and because GoDaddy, in our case, doesn't support SSL, it's defaulted to sending out the emails clear text. So at this time, I should have received an email. And I did from Greg Olson. And so essentially, in this case, it's if we're impersonating an internal IT person or maybe a compliance person, it essentially says, hey, our IT policy dictates that everyone have strong passwords. Ensure you're in compliance with our policy and check out your password on this cool new Intel password checker site. And if the user clicks on the phishing website, bear with me here. And if we just click on the phishing link here, you can see the website we're serving up here, the intel.issds.com. It's basically, if you guys have seen this is a live website. Intel does have a strong password checker, which they claim they're not storing your password. But essentially, the users come here and they want to test the strength of their password. So they put in their super secret password, and it grades it, tells them whether it's strong or not. In our case, my password's not safe. It really doesn't matter because what's happening is we're harvesting the passwords and writing those out to a text file. And you might be asking, well, they never entered in a username. So what good is a password if we don't have a username? Well, remember, we have their email address right here. So we have their base64 encoded email address right here, and using a little PHP get functionality, we can basically pull down that from the URL, decode it, and now we have not just the password, but we have the email address as well. And most companies, in my experiences, have the same username as their email address. So now we have their email address, maybe their username, and essentially a password that they probably tested. And in my experiences have shown that they put in their Active Directory or their real passwords. And so now we have a username and password that we can try to replay right against all external facing services. So whether they have a VPN that doesn't do two-factor auth, OWA, anything like that, we can try to replay those credentials, and we've harvested those credentials. So now we've launched this phishing campaign. Let's go back to reports. And you can see that now, before we didn't have any reports, but we've launched a campaign, so now we're starting to generate statistics here. So if I simply go to the stats page here, you can see that someone's clicked on it. And if I just hover over the visitors, you can see I've clicked on it in this case, which makes sense. So we sent out 5 emails. We've got 20% success rate here right now. And we can see which IP address, all the logs. We can dive down into these details here. What I'm interested in this case, is the password. So if we look, you can see automatically Phishing Frenzy has decoded the base64 encoded email address, and we have the super secret password. And the user, they probably had no idea. They just simply entered a password and didn't know that we took their username and their password at the same time. Questions about the demo? That's all I have for the demo. Yeah, so I started out and I cloned the website, and then I just I put some PHP functionality, and I believe there's a get method that pulls specific parameters out of the URL. And so I pulled the base64 encoded email address out of the URL, and then I just put some logic to basically decode it on the fly and write that out to the text file. And so that's why you're seeing, all that logic is done by Phishing Frenzy, and you simply just sit here and you just wait for the passwords to come in.
Is that functionality in the framework?
That functionality is in the framework right now. When you create the template, you basically need to create your own website. You need to create your own email through that. This just offers some framework around how you can deploy it. So if you set up your campaign in an architecture that Phishing Frenzy can support, you can then send it through Phishing Frenzy and manage all these statistics and get some of this dynamic content and get some of this advanced features. But if you just spend the time up front, create a phishing template that works for this framework, like I said, you can share it with the community. You can reuse it for all future campaigns, because you're going to have to set up a campaign anyway.
That looks for email and website, right?
Correct.
In that package, there's 2 separate.
Yep, there's 2 separate templates. So a lot of times I'll use this just for the website too. So I'll do phone calls, pretext phone calls, and I'll use this just to manage the website. So I won't actually send any emails out, but I can track the clicks and things like that. So I'll direct them to a website, but I'll use this just to stand up the website, make it active. When I'm done with the phone calls, make it inactive, take the website down. At this time, it does not. But if I tried, if anyone else entered passwords in, oh look, Eric just entered his. Your mom is hot. But yeah, so the stats here are refreshing. We can hover over, we can see we got 2 users here. We've up to 40% success. It's basically dynamically generating the content, and we can see where those IP addresses came from mapped over Google. Other questions? Yeah, back there. Yeah, so it's really that would be under visitors here. So I could basically cross-reference. We've had 2 visitors, but maybe I only had 1 visitor that entered a password. So in this case, we can see it's 2 for 2 because there's 2 passwords that have been entered by 2 unique users. But what you would do is, let's say we had a third visitor, but we only had 2 unique passwords. You could cross-reference and say, yeah, we had 3 visitors, only 2 took the bait and actually entered passwords. Yeah, so that's a great question. If you know, a lot of users will forward this email out to someone, it's still going to show up as, so if you sent it to Emilum, when Emilum, you know, forwards that out, it's still going to look like Eric clicked on it, because we crafted that URL upon sending it, and so that static URL is sitting there within the body of the email, and when he forwards it, it's just following that unique identifier out to everyone else. And we've seen that. I've done a Microsoft update to a company where it's like, hey, it looks like the internal IT guy is like, hey, a critical patch has been released, you know, click on here and download, you know, the executable. And they'll just send it out to other people in other companies. And here I'm getting remote access to other companies, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? This isn't in scope.
It is now.
Yeah, exactly. Other questions? What were you thinking? Absolutely. I mean, this is just a framework. I mean, you can get as granular or vague as you want. This is just to help, you know, some of the challenges that we encounter. I mean, you can get as specific as you want. And I mean, I do this as spear phishing to specific, you know, specific companies, specific domains. It's really flexible to however you want to set it up. Other questions? All right, guys, thanks. That's all.
Congratulations, man. Good job.
Thanks.